بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, the intention for the next number of days during Ramadan, inshallah till the end of Ramadan, is that prior to Isha, maybe 10-15 minutes to Isha, I give a small lesson. I talk about maybe the surahs of the Quran in terms of their purpose and their goals, hopefully to enhance the experience of those of you who are reading the Quran, especially those who find difficulty in understanding the meanings of the words, or find those surahs to be sometimes overwhelming. They're so big and so large. So the goal for me is, inshallah, to offer you a basic compass, just so you know what the surah is basically talking about, what the juz. So I'll start with the beginning, and I'll start with the first surah, not the first actually, the second, Surat Al-Baqara. And you'll say, well, why don't you talk about Fatiha first? Well, that's not going to happen. Surat Al-Fatiha is, it's impossible to speak of Surat Al-Fatiha, not in one of these lessons, not in two of these lessons, not in 1,000 lessons. In no way, in no form are we able to explain Surat Al-Fatiha. Why? Because not only is the Quran summarized, but all the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala since Adam till this day, all the meanings of all these books are summarized between Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'een. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, and this is what our scholars have taught us. So it's impossible to actually break down Surat Al-Fatiha for you. It is miraculous no matter how you look at it, no matter from what angle you use. Surat Al-Fatiha is a miraculous surah. It's a beautiful surah. It is the key. It's called, Al-Fatiha means opening, but it also means the key. It's the key. No surah in the Quran can be recited or understood unless you have Surat Al-Fatiha sitting right there as your reference. It's a reference code for every surah in the Quran. That's why I can't stand up in Salah and say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alif Lam. I have to read Fatiha first. If I don't, you have to tell me. And if I don't do it, then the Salah doesn't count. Why? Because no surah in the Quran has its own reference. Al-Fatiha is the reference to everything. So if you read a word in the Quran and you're not sure, can it mean this or can it mean that? You go back to Al-Fatiha and say, what does Fatiha say? What is the meaning of Surah Al-Fatiha? Tell me it's supposed to be. And that's what it's going to be. Because nothing goes against Surah Al-Fatiha. It is the reference for every word. Within the Quran, it's the reference to every word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ever sent to any prophet throughout history. And that is why I'm not going to talk about Surah Al-Fatiha as a beginning. It's overwhelming for someone like me to speak of Surah Al-Fatiha. But what I will try to do is give you some of the purpose, the goal of the surahs that are going to come after. Surah Al-Baqara, for example, we're going to start with that, inshallah, with whatever time we have left. Surah Al-Baqara it is the longest surah in the Quran. It's a Madani surah. It was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ during the early Madani time. Not all of it, but most of it. And then certain parts of it were revealed towards the end of his life, ﷺ, to the point where the last ayah that was ever revealed to him, ﷺ, is in Surah Al-Baqarah. That will be recited today, inshallah. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. It's the last ayah. So Surah Al-Baqarah was there with the Prophet ﷺ from the moment he entered Medina to the day he passed away, ﷺ. So that's why they call it Jamia. It encompasses everything. Not only does it encompass everything Islamically, it encompassed most of his life, ﷺ, and most of the story of Islam. So what is the purpose of what it's talking about? It's the longest and it's the easiest one of all to speak of the goal. Meaning you will not get lost when you're looking at Surah Al-Baqarah, trying to figure out what is it trying to tell me. There's all these stories and all these ahkam and rulings, and do they have a common thread? Is there something that is taking all these different stories and all these pages and ayat in one direction? Most definitely there is. The first 29 ayah are the muqaddimah, they're the introduction. These verses are underrated. They're not recited as much as they need to be. The first 29 ayah, my advice to you is go back and recite the first 29 a few more times. It's the introduction of the whole Quran. Within them you will find every ethic and every meaning and every value that you can possibly hope for, you will find encompassed in these 29 verses at the beginning. The moment the 29 verses are done, ayah number 30 states immediately what the surah is going to be talking about. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Right at the beginning of the Quran, the job is given. The job description for human beings is immediately given. Within life, what are you here to do? Why were you created and where are you going? This is what you are. You are a Khalifa. This is your job. This is why you're here. Right at the beginning of the Quran. Sometimes we think this is something that was picked up throughout, reciting the whole Mus'haf. No. If you're reading the Mus'haf from the beginning going down, you'll be given the reference key right at the beginning of Al-Fatiha. And then after the introduction, which is very important, right after the introduction, you're given the goal, you're given the purpose, you're given your job. You are a Khalifa, that is what you're here to do. Now the continuation is going to be examples. Examples of the first Khalifa, Adam alayhi salam. That's why he comes in the story. He's the first one. He's number one human being. He's the first person to be given that job description. No one before him was told, you are a Khalifa. He's the first one to be told, meaning that he's going to be the example for us to learn from. What is it going to mean? And that's why that story, the story of Adam alayhi salam in Jannah with Hawa, is encompassed, is explained in a bit more detail in this first version within Surat Al-Baqara. After that, immediately, you're going to find pages of Bani Israel. Page after page of Bani Israel. Why? Because he's going to give us subhanahu wa ta'ala two more examples. Examples of those who were given the job of Khalifa, of someone who was responsible for something in someone else's name. That is the best I can do to translate it to you. You can tell me, well, a steward is a good translation. Maybe. I've never used the word steward in a sentence in my life. But I can tell you what Khalifa means practically. It is someone who is doing a job in the name of someone else. You are doing a job in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we're here to do. We are here to take care of the earth in His name. That's the job description. So we were given two examples right after Adam alayhi salam. An example of those who messed it up. They messed it up pretty bad. Banu Israel made every mistake in the book. Not everything about them is wrong. Not everything about them is bad. But subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us all the times where He told them to do things and they made mistakes. Or when He told them to do things, they did it right. And then made mistakes later and didn't fix it. And He shows us every single mistake Banu Israel fell into. And he states that they are Khalifa. Where? Ya Bani Israel, اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم. Twice in Surah Al-Baqara. وأني فضلتكم على العالمين. And I have chosen you upon everyone. Over everyone I've chosen you to be the khulafa, and they didn't do a good job. And then in the same surah, we have an example of someone who did it well. Who is the example of the person who did it really well? Also, word for word. Ibrahim alayhi salam. إني جاعلك what? للناس imama. You're going to be an imam. You're going to be someone who will lead others. And an example of someone who took the istikhlaf, the concept of being a khalifa, and perfected it, alayhi salatu wasalam. And that's the first part of that's the first juz' in Surah Al-Baqarah. And then from juz' number 2 till the end of the surah, when you look at it, you feel this constant struggle of life. Every problem you can imagine. Dictatorship, you'll find it in the surah. Bravery, and courage, and sacrifice, you'll find it in that surah. Oppression and aggression towards those who are weak, or towards those who are less fortunate, you will find it in the surah. You will find problems within families. You'll find problems between spouses. You'll find problems that are financial. The whole surah is this big struggle, because as a khalifa, this struggle is real. Your struggle as a Khalifa is going to be within life. And these are the types of struggles that you're going to see. And He gives us subhanahu wa ta'ala how to deal with them. That's why in Surat Al-Baqarah, the manhaj, the actual system of life is all there. The full system is there. You want the ahkam ad-din, salah is there. Siyam is there. That's why we know the ayat of siyam that you recite Ramadan is in Surat Al-Baqarah. Hajj wa atimul hajj is in Surat Al-Baqarah. Jihad, the concept of fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and standing up for what is right, you'll find it in Surat Al-Baqarah. When you talk about a financial system, the first time riba was spoken out against clearly was in Surah Al-Baqarah. You'll hear it recited today. When it talks about the social relationships, you'll find talaq and zawaj all through Surah Al-Baqarah. In detail sometimes, in detail of how you're supposed to manage this. So the whole surah is this big struggle. Why? Here's the system of life. Here's the system you're going to, here's the manhaj, and here's the struggle you're going to find, and all the problems that come with it, and here's the way you're supposed to deal with it. You can get overwhelmed when you read Surah Al-Baqarah. You really can. And subhanAllah, it was made long, so even those who memorize it feel overwhelmed by it at the beginning. All the students are like, what? How long is it? You tell them it's 2 juz' and almost a half, and like, no, it's impossible. I could barely memorize Surah Al-Fajr when I was like, how am I supposed to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah? It can be overwhelming for a moment. But it isn't. And ask any hafiz. Any hafiz will tell you the easiest surah for them is to recite Surah Al-Baqarah after you've spent some time. After this whole struggle, this big struggle, coming across ayat that are the strongest ayat in the Quran. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Coming across la ikraha fi din, putting down a very clear ruling that there's no coercion in religion, giving you stories of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Uzair, of people of resurrection, of people who have philosophical questions. Ya Rab, how do you do it and why do you do it? And explain to me, I want to see. Has everything in it. Just struggle upon struggle. Come at the end of it. Just as you start to feel a bit overwhelmed with this whole manhaj. You were given a job. You're a khalifa. That's a lot to process. And then you were given examples of khulafa who did not do well at all, and now you feel scared. Then you were given examples of someone who did it really well, Ibrahim, but he is too great for me to be like, so I'm even more scared. And now you give me this manhaj that has all these problems and difficulties and difference of opinions, and it is very comprehensive and deep, and you feel even more overwhelmed. You come to the end of the surah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy. He says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. No, I'm only asking what you can. لا ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. Then he gives you a dua to say so this will become easy for you. What are you going to say in the dua? The only place you find this dua in the Quran, ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. Yes, you've given us a beautiful system, but please don't hold us accountable when we forget and make mistakes. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. And when we make these mistakes, Ya Rab, don't hold us to these mistakes. Don't remind us of these mistakes. Don't punish us for these mistakes. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. And don't overwhelm us and overload us with that which we cannot carry. واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا. At the end of the story, you find this dua that makes everything better. That's why we love it. That's why the Prophet ﷺ told us, memorize the last couple of ayat in Surat Al-Baqara and recite them all the time, because they make it easy for you. After this very overwhelming surah that explains to you at the beginning of the Quran the job and everything that comes with that job, remind yourself, He's not asking you for more than what you can, and that He will forgive you, and continue to ask Him for that. I hope that was beneficial. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll talk about Ali Imran. Subhanakallah bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.